everybody. Regeneration fans, maybe not fans of regeneration, maybe first time, maybe you've been listening to many podcasts. Welcome. It is the Regeneration Podcast. I'm here with my good buddy who I missed last week. Michael, you carried, that was excellent. I was busy. Michael will be able to tie some things in, but that was a great talk on psychedelics and spirituality.
It was a great talk. In fact, kind of segue into what we're going to talk today about.
I think so.
Yeah, but it was different flying without you, Mike.
Yeah. Every time Michael hasn't been able to show up, it's been spontaneous. All of a sudden, you're just not there, or you got severed a couple of times in the middle of a podcast. It's great.
That's real. Well, I remember when we talked to, speaking of the Underworld, when we talked to James Tunney.
Yeah.
Remember my power? I got disconnected right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
It's because we were talking about fairies.
I think so. And I felt like I was way out of my league.
I don't know if you caught this, but he said later that after that was broadcast, that he thought that the fairies took retaliation on him for spilling too many beans and let his bathtub overflow.
I didn't hear him say that. That's great.
So he told me. Yeah. I think I told the fairies too much.
Are you getting the Canadian wildfire smoke again?
Yes.
It's bad here.
It's not
Reminds
bad.
me. Yeah.
We do have a air advisory, but it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look like it did a month
Ours
ago.
would be again a cloudless sky normally, but you can look straight at the sun. It's just a little yellow, flaky, and yeah. Wow. So the air, I was driving home from work and I saw this air and it reminded me, I was thinking of well, I think it's related, like nuclear fallout, but then I thought of reading Cormac McCarthy's The Road, that it creates this kind of apocalyptic atmosphere, all this flower smoke in the air. And then I thought of our guest because I knew he was joining us. Cormac McCarthy, of course, has so many novels set in the Southwest of America, right around New Mexico and Santa Fe. And our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, his name is Stephen Clarke. He comes from that region. And I want to say how I got to know Stephen Clarke. I don't know what two words I Googled, but it's just something I do. It might have been Teotihuacan and Steiner, could have been Teotihuacan and Divine Feminine. I have no idea. But I found a series of essays called Mexican Mysteries. And to me, they were I was skiing in the Catskills on a February break. And I just woke up 4 days in a row early to just try to digest this. So much of it was new. And I think since that time, I've read what I would say 2 essays and an amazing bibliography, really an amazing bibliography. And what it had to do was some weird short little book that we'll hear about that Rudolf Steiner wrote, where he had some image, some vision, some sense of things that had taken place on this continent. And I knew it jived with me because I've always thought if even we just talked about the Catholic faith, that America still has to become close to finding its own song. And these series of essays have done as much for me as for I've been thinking about it a long time, but for the last 7 years or so, these essays have been more fructifying than anything else I've ever read. So I want to welcome Stephen Clarke, friends. And Stephen, give us a little backstory. What's your background and what led you into this Steiner book in particular? Because it seems like you've spent a disproportionate amount of your writing time on this subject. The American continent, Our Lady of Guadalupe. It's a wild mashup. Tell us, people, I don't even know your background. I think you're a BMW audio mechanic, right?
I was in my last incarnation this life. I had a job for almost 30 years, and I started it myself, and I ended up being able to sell it. We didn't get much from it, but at least I didn't die on the job like a lot of the fellow mechanics are probably destined to do.
Yeah. It's just so neat that you're so intelligent, and I'm sure that the power of your writing and your insights has something to do with the fact that you've worked with your hands and things.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm, yeah, but the whole thing about America is very interesting because, like you say, it still has to, well, America has always known itself, but those of us who are of a colonizer ancestry are still kind of floating on the surface. We don't know the prayers that are said to welcome the dawn or the harvest, which songs and stories are known by the receiving spirits on the other side of, which is not another world, it's just this world. The whole mind-body duality thing is not a part of native psychology or cosmology. It's all very, very integrated. And what we really have in modern American culture is a vastly disassociated culture where everyone is pretty much scrambling over the backs of everyone else to get the little tasty morsels that are dangling in front of us, and they make us pay for it. They make us work for it and spend our money on it. The whole thing is so normalized that we've taken it, so much of it, for granted, which makes it so difficult to recognize what has been here for so long, and that's what I've tried to do.
You've done it so well.
Well, it has to be actualized in people's lives. It's one thing to discuss or impart information, but you really have to spend a lot of time chewing it and digesting it and throwing out the seeds and the bits of husk and the bits of dirt and stuff that comes along with anything that rolls along through this world.
And I want Michael to kind of follow me up on this because he knows the movement better, but something that stands out is so singular in your work is you're totally free within that kind of anthroposophical worldview. That your essays model this engagement with the works as Rudolf Steiner wanted, and that you use them again you've harnessed this great freedom, and you don't work. Again, like it's fun to listen to an intelligent person think and write, But Michael, I mean, that movement better. How rare is Stephen's writings?
Stephen is super rare because
okay, so I don't know how rare he is. Yeah.
Stephen dares to say maybe Steiner was wrong about this thing, which you don't hear very much in that movement. Trust me, I've been around it for 30 some years myself. And in fact, I was actually thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about this, but when I was out in the garden this morning, weeding the carrots, and we have a 50-foot carrot bed, so weeding carrots is tedious, especially when they're little. But I was thinking about, because I caught some heat from a friend of mine in one of my books, not really criticizing harshly Rudolf Steiner, but calling into question something he said. I mean, just one thing, right? Because I admire Rudolf Steiner, and I think he's probably the most important formative force in my thinking over the last 35 years or so. But some people get really, it's a kind of fundamentalism you often find in anthroposophical circles where you can't question the teacher, even though one of Rudolf Steiner's main points was, don't take my word for it.
Right.
See if it works. See if it rings true. Don't take my word for it. Don't turn me into a guru, right?
Exactly.
You were so passionate about your subject, Stephen. You must have that had to inspire you to follow wherever truth led.
Yeah. Well, there's two things involved there that pointed me in a certain way. One's that is that I really feel like I'm from here. I feel like I'm an American. I've been acculturated too by studying and actually being initiated by Native American medicine people, and I've been accepted into their ceremonies and their families. And being down in the Southwest, there's always natives coming and going, not just the local ones, but the other ones. They're always traveling and going around doing that. And so that was long before I met Steiner. So I had an introduction to what was going on in this country. But I was fascinated by Steiner because although I had spent a lot of time studying Buddhism of various sorts before I met Steiner, I was a little bit not perturbed, I guess, because the Buddhist philosophy is it's so atemporal. It's up to you to apply it to modern circumstances however you want, and you can do it. But Steiner really got into the occultism of machines, electricity. He was totally, his worldview was totally integrated with European cultural movements, the First World War, progress, technology, all that stuff. Steiner, really tried to grapple with that, and he did a great job. But he was just a guy, really. And here we are. We're all trying to do our best, and some of us, stand on the shoulders of giants, and some of us are trying to dig our way out of a hole. And I think just about everyone is doing a little bit of all of that stuff. I certainly never took for granted that, that Steiner had an open window onto everything. And then, like I said, being interested in being a spiritual citizen here, you come across Steiner's references to Native Americans, and invariably he refers to them as being extinct.
Yeah.
Now, you can have different philosophical differences about other things that Steiner got from the Akashic record or speculated upon or whatever, and have fascinating discussions about, was Steiner right or wrong about this, that, or the other thing. And usually he's got a really great point to make. You can hack your way through all the commentary and his own words to try and figure out what his point was. Frequently it's extremely obscure and off the point, and you wonder why he spent so much time talking about it at all. And maybe there was one person in the audience that needed to hear that, but sometimes it's just hard to make out what he's talking about. And you give him the benefit of the doubt, but when he says that the Native Americans are extinct and that they're a form of life in between monkeys and humans, well, you got to be willing to draw the line. It's just an error of fact. And you say, okay, well, Steiner was, he had some bug under his saddle or something that made him say something crazy like that, but it can't be supported, and it's foolish to try and do so.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why he went down that road, unless he had never confronted the fact of the underworld in spirituality, which is the spiritual world of the Native Americans in this country, in this part of the world. And so there's
what was the line you used before we came on? Like, we're missing half the story of everything.
It's half the story.
So Steiner, so I'm an outsider. I'm just gonna say, like, Steiner, I might have thought, like, obviously these Mexican mysteries are about the American landmass. You're saying in general, to somebody who doesn't know nearly as much Steiner as the two of you, the underworld was not his thing.
Absolutely not. There is the place of the underworld in the Western mystery tradition, and that has to do with the Grail and with what happened with Jesus on Easter Saturday.
Yeah.
In the biblical accounts, the whole of the Torah and all the Old Testament is all about what led up to the incarnation of Jesus Christ, even though the Jews don't see it like that, but it's part of the Christian Bible too. And then in the New Testament, you've got the life of Jesus, and then the crucifixion, and then you have Easter Saturday, which is like a blank spot on the tape, and then, wow, Easter Sunday, there's Jesus, he's back. Where'd he go? What happened? No one knows. No one talks about it. But when I investigated the spiritual, the perennial spiritual stream in this country going back 2,000 years, I found, and it matched up with some of what Steiner said, namely that in Mexico, he didn't say Teotihuacan, but it's obvious that's what it was. And I've satisfied myself that's where it was. In Teotihuacan, there was a participation by the spiritual responsible spiritual people to cooperate with the sacrificial mission of Christ on Good Friday, not
Right.
Good Friday itself, but Easter Saturday, when Jesus dropped into the earth, into the body of the earth. It was the spiritual people in this part of the country that received him and conducted him to the courts of the deep mother from whom he received his resurrection. That's my general view of the thing. So if you take the sculpture, Michelangelo's sculpture of the Pietà, you have the dying or dead Christ off the cross.
This is brilliant. People need to hear this. Yeah.
Of the arms of his mother. Then you go to the Madonna and Child. You have the deep mother resurrecting her son and giving him back to the earth.
So isn't that wild? So, but the first story is from Mater, the infant and child, to Mater Dolorosa. You're saying with this movement, around the time of Teotihuacan, that's reversed. I like it. And you go from the Mater Dolorosa to giving Christ back to the planet.
Yes.
Okay, right. Yeah,
And,
that's brilliant.
and we should note that in that sculpture by Michelangelo, the Virgin would be like 7 or 8 feet tall in real scale. And
Well, that's
Christ,
right, isn't it?
Christ is human scaled, and she's like huge. She's
I
like
hadn't noticed that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so so people might need to hear some of that again. Like when I first read your stuff, Steve, and again, I was skiing, it was February. I'm just thinking that okay, this guy is saying that the effect of the incarnation had a special reception on this other huge landmass, which also has its whole poetry from the Arctic down to the southern tip of South America. And that in Teotihuacan, which again, if the scholarship is still where you were when you wrote these, Stephen, we see some human sacrifice, but not much. We see a reverence for the divine feminine, and we see evidence that something happened there that led to this great civilization that kind of folded itself up after a time. And that I'm starting to weave in some of my own language, which the listeners will hear, is that after 2,000 years, especially the last 1,000, of sky god top down, that this connection to the underworld on Holy Saturday gives us a charism on the American landmass that has been explored by the Native Americans in particular, and leads us to say something like the following, is that we need to focus for the next 2,000 years on the underworld, things that are below, that are not from the devil. And that is our kind of American calling. Does that get a lot of it, Steve?
Sure, yeah, I'll go with it. Yep. There's an interesting thing from Steiner about this. He if you read enough Steiner, eventually it's way off in the corner. You can find it really supports the picture of this. One of the last Michael letters, that's one of his last lecture cycles. In one of the very last ones, he talks about that as soon as anything started to happen in the creation of the cosmos as a whole, as soon as there was anything that had an interior space, it was, as soon as there was anything that was separated from the cosmos as a whole that had an interior subjective space to it, spiritual beings came to work not from the outside, but from the inside on what that was. And I think that paradigm works all the way through, and that here on this planet, we have cosmic forces and we have earthly forces, and we are suspended between them.
Yeah.
They like in a set of 6 bungee cords. We got four in the four directions, one above and one below, and we're in the middle here. But with just about every spiritual stream in Western culture for the last 2,000 years, there's been no connection with what's below. And we say the sun draws the plants out of the earth, but the sun provides the generative, provides the impulse, but the life, the nurturing, comes from the earth. When people make babies, the male is there, and then Deus abscondus.
Yeah.
What do you
That's
say?
correct.
That it's the mother that hangs in there,
Right.
not just for 9 months, but for the whole life of the child, to keep supporting that person. And that's what Mother Earth does for us.
Right. And I think that also, just psychologically, this is what I've been yammering on about for a few years now. That's what Sophiology is acknowledging the mother finally, right? Is the nurturing, right? And that's,
Yes,
I'm a biodynamic farmer. I can't help but think everything you just said is gospel. Right.
Well, if I can riff on what you said about Sophiology, that's pretty big nowadays and getting bigger, and that's great. But still looking for Sophia in the cosmos. And that's where you, according to my point of view, you will find Sophia in the cosmos. But I mean, what is she? Is she like a ghost? Is she an equal fourth person to the three people of the Trinity? You start looking at the theology of that, and it's all a bit fuzzy. Well, the way I see it is that everything we think about dealing with Sophia is like, how Batman projects the bat icon on the cloud from the what do you call it, the big light?
Yeah, the spotlight there.
Spotlight, yeah. Well, Sophia is like the image in the cloud. The Great Mother, the feminine identity, parallel being to God the Father, is deep within is at the core of the planet, and she projects herself out into the cosmos.
Exactly.
So you have like a ghostly apparition there, which is,
Well, that's what I think you see in a lot of people promulgating a kind of Sophiology is they're trying to do it within the context of received Christian theology, and it just doesn't fit, right?
exactly,
It just
yeah.
doesn't fit, and so there's
And Steiner didn't challenge that. See, he accepted that, and so he was hamstrung from trying to go there, particularly since the underworld is consistently conflated with hell.
Yeah.
That's my point. Yep,
Everything that's bad in the world sinks down into the underworld. The core of the earth is the source of all evil. Well, when did this happen? When this whole planet is the wrought work of the gods, quote unquote, since day zero. At what point did it all flip into being totally evil, and we're trying to survive here on the crust above a huge boiling cauldron of shit?
Stephen's going now. Go. Yeah.
Well, you can believe that if you want, but I don't, and I haven't for a long time, and I'm doing okay with it.
Well, and I think that's what you see with a lot of people who get attracted to what the way I understand Sophiology is they simultaneously. In fact, there was just someone today who commented on this. What accompanies it is what, in a non-disparaging way, we would call a kind of paganism, which is connected to the earth, right? And what you see with too many, especially Orthodox theologians, they try to take that, like you said, Stephen, back into the cosmos, right? Or back, to the sky someplace.
It's metaphysical. It's safe. There's no consequences, to being right or wrong. It's
Right.
philosophical. It's abstract. It's all very cognitive. But if you're walking on the earth and you respect the living earth for what it is, you're going to be very much in your body.
Yeah.
You know, your somatic consciousness is frankly is a lot smarter than our brain.
Our friend Therese is gonna love this, Michael.
Yeah,
Right?
she'll be on
We have
it.
a yeah, she'll get it all.
But I mean, and I don't, Stephen probably doesn't know this, but where I live, my farm, is the site of an ancient Ojibwe meeting ground.
Oh,
So we often find, working in the garden, I don't think we found any this year, but last we find them usually a lot of spearheads and arrowheads. And then we found out, because actually I wouldn't have known, but a guy who used to come here to stay with his uncle and aunt when he was a kid, he was older. He was taking pictures of my house. I'm like, hey buddy, what are you taking pictures of my house for? He said, no. I used to come here when I was a kid and spend the time. Do you know about the burial ground? And he thought it was a burial ground, but we looked it up and it was not a burial ground, it was a meeting ground. And he was
that's
telling me
better.
he thought it was.
You don't
Yeah.
want to be living on a burial ground.
Yeah, you don't want to be living on. It's not, and it wasn't. There were no bones found here, but they found a lot of artifacts. In fact, because it was excavated, at least parts of it were by Michigan State University, like almost 100 years ago.
Grave robbers.
Well, they were, yeah. Well, they
Stephen,
didn't take any
tell us-
bones.
yeah.
They didn't take any bones. They didn't take anything, from what I understand. But it's
Yeah,
but
well,
you can tell. I mean, the thing is, there's and you can feel. In fact, I took my daughter out into the pasture because I couldn't figure out where it was, where the ground was,
Hmm.
where the sacred ground was, until I bought a cow and she ate down all the grass out in the pasture, and then you could see there's a ring right over there, like a mound. And I brought my daughter out there. I said, just follow me. she was following me. And all of a sudden she said, whoa, what is that? It was coming up from the ground.
And Stephen, tell us about, in one sense, and I don't mean to make light of it at all, but tell us about the underworld. We're hearing a lot about like what it's not. You credit a lot to your relationship with the Navajo, if I'm right. And you experienced things. Michael was going to make a connection between last week's episode and this subject on the underworld last week on psychedelics and spirituality. But you meet people, you meet things there. Tell us about it. And eventually we want to hear, like, how should somebody who's just being exposed to this for the first time, what should they do with the information they're hearing? Go ahead.
well, according not only to Steiner, but he borrowed this lock, stock, and barrel from centuries of Christian theology. You have the spiritual hierarchies, right? And the angels are close to us, and we have personal guardian angels. Then we have archangels. They were further away, and they regulate cultures and things like that. And then you have archai, greater than that. They regulate great cycles of time, and you go on like that all the way up to God. Well, with the underworld, there are also levels of beings that are responsible for the continual recreation and maintenance of the world. You have elemental spirits of really basically like rather minor ones of light and water and earth and fire. You have other small scale spirits that hang out with flowers and vegetables and whatnot. The deeper you go, the more powerful and broader their effect gets. And although it's rather a mirror image, you're familiar with the Kabbalistic tree of life glyph,
Right.
Most people have seen it. Well, you just flip it upside down with the earth then at the top, and you have the rest of the tree descending all the way down to the mother, at the lowest or most or innermost location. And in between there, you have worlds. You have worlds within worlds within worlds, and it's marvelously complex, but it's not an exact mirror image, because take women and men, we're pretty much the same thing. We share 99% of our chromosomes with flatworms, I guess, but we share even more with women. We're all guys here on the podcast, but we share most of our chromosomes with women, and we aren't opposite. We're more alike, than we're opposite, but there's a kink between the two. It's not the same, but there's a complementarity that makes a union and diversity kind of thing going on. And that's what happens between the underworld and the overworld in my experience. Now, the thing is, the problem that people can have, and maybe they sense it with the underworld, is that you're dealing with powerful forces. They aren't abstract ideologies or theories or conceptual categories. You meet someone in the underworld and you are transformed. That's how you know it's a spiritual experience, because it's transformative. Maybe on a large scale, maybe on a small scale. But you can talk about cosmic stuff all day long and go nowhere. But you go into the underworld and start meeting the forces that are there, and it's dangerous. Fire is effective, but it burns. You can't have power without consequences. So that's where you meet your karma. But it's a lovely place.
After terrifying us.
It's a lovely place. It's beautiful. It's everyone wants to go back to the womb. That's it. That's the big one. And it feeds us 24/7, 365.
What are the creatures you kind of talk about in your work? I'll say is not a total taxonomy. That's not your goal, the taxonomy, at least in the work I've read. But you meet, and Michael, I think it's people who listen to this Joe Rogan, they're talking about DMT and certain psychedelics. And I had my youngest son, Aiden, who's been on the podcast. He was talking about these, and I said, this guy I'm reading now, Stephen Clarke, can describe these things. And I don't know if they're sane, but at one point in the essays, you describe these creatures. They're quite, describe them. Do you have a name for them? Kind of in DMT, they're kind of like gremlin type gray creatures that seem to come out from the.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you want to talk too much about what you see in doing entheogens, which I have a healthy respect for, believe me. But it basic entheogens of any sort really only take you to the astral world. Okay. And if you know anything about the astral world, it's like the dream time. When you dream, anything can happen in your dream life, and sometimes sometimes you wake up, and you say, I had a lucid dream. I could have, I've just been changed as much as if I had, walked out the door and had this and happened to me in waking life, and you get shook up. But actually, those are real tricky because they're mischievous, and they got a life of their own, and most of them, for good reason, really don't like people. So you got to be hard for them, just waiting to fuck with you, because they're waiting to get some licks back in. I'll tell you. They aren't too happy with people and what we're doing with things. So you got to be careful dipping into that. But what do you call it? Beginner's luck, or angels take care of fools and children. It's a delicate thing. But that stuff is real in its own way. In its own world, it's real. If you're on DMT or LSD, you've got to deal with what's happening there. And afterwards, you've got to integrate it. And you may have gone to a place where, I don't think I want to go there anymore, or maybe you do. It's not the end all and be all. Right. And you got to have a frame of reference too. That stuff is is very interesting, but it's not the spiritual world. The spiritual world can leak through anything to get to us, but drugs of any sort are not an open door. They're a hell of a lot of fun, and that's
Interesting.
that's
Yeah, I mean,
what-
you speak with so much
and
authority.
there's
about this stuff,
wisdom.
Stephen.
If you're doing the entheogens in a traditional context, see what I said has to do with, psychotourism. Oh, let's go ayahuasca. I know someone did
Yeah.
ayahuasca. Let's go to Brazil. We'll hang out for a couple of weeks and blah blah blah. Well, you aren't going to get the real thing there. If you study with native shamans and have undergone the training, which many times is just hanging out and seeing how people operate, across the board and all the conditions of life, you start getting things by osmosis. That's where a lot of the teaching is. You won't get it from
An
so-called
instruction manual.
instruction
Yeah.
or stuff like that. You just got to.
Do you find the shamanic
And
tradition?
it takes
Oh, go ahead.
time. At that point, you're connected with a whole set of links to the ancestral traditions, which are living traditions, which are constantly in contact with their spirit ancestors and guides and guiding beings on the other side. Then you're protected, but you got to be all in. You
Yeah.
can't. And even then, the lesson is you got to be able to do it without any of that stuff. It's all about focused intention.
Right.
You don't have focused intention, you're a kite without a string. You're just floating around. And that can be fun too. So take your pick.
It's really great. Is the shamanic tradition, like, to a total outsider? I live in the Haudenosaunee territory, the Seneca Nation, Western New York. But if thinking in the Catholic Church, I work for the Roman Catholic Church, and you have Marian apparitions. I'm glad some are approved and some not approved. Because we had a guy in Rochester for one time who was a Kodak chemist, and he was a claimed seer, but he would just put his eyes up in his head and claim that he talked to Mary every day at noon, and she said pray for an end to abortion, and then people would go see him have this and they'd walk out. But in America, we've seen how we've treated the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples. You were brought into, and what I like about you, Stephen, is you're not making it sound so esoteric that some Navajo shaman knocked on your door and you were taken out at night and you met Carlos Castaneda. But anyhow,
It doesn't happen like that.
no. But what's available to people now? You mentioned the books of R.J. Stewart. I've read a bunch of those. But so first I asked two questions, but is decreasing, what's going on across the country, or maybe you can only speak for the Navajo or in the Southwest. Is the shamanic tradition, the authentic one, alive and well? And how do they know charlatans? Are there charlatans from real people who can help you in this?
Right, that's a fundamental question. They've solved that because they don't have large institutional structures. They don't have hierarchies with levels of people in charge. If you can heal people, if you're respected by the people in your community, if you're the one they go to when there's an abandoned child and someone needs to take them into their family, if you're willing to work for nothing because all these people are the ones you grew up with and the ones that raised you, you are known. Your character is known. It's not because
That's really cool.
you have fancy theories. You're respected, and when you speak, people listen to you, and those are the people that have the clout, and it's not for conjecture, but there's no proof either,
Yeah.
So and some medicine men are like straight arrow types. They got creases in their jeans and they tuck their shirts in and they're squared away, man, just like in the military. They're on the job 24/7. And other guys are like, really loosey-goosey. But when it comes to it, doing a ceremony, you things line up, you get rain out of a clear sky. And it's not a miracle. Well, it is a miracle, but just because everything's a miracle. You get agreements from the world. Wild animals come up to you. You're okay if wild animals like you. That's a good sign. So there's all kind of real world indications. And the real initiates that I've known in the native traditions have not been, extraordinary in any specific way. Julie, my wife, and I have come up with the term. We call them not supernatural, but super ordinary. What do we say, Julie? Super normal. We say super normal.
How about supernaturally natural? That I've heard that described. Yeah.
They're super normal.
Yeah.
They're extra human. They aren't out there. They aren't, doing spooky stuff. They're really reassuring to be around because, they're really individuated and at ease with themselves. And
really
the spirits that come
brilliant,
through in the ceremonies are they're these great spirits of the four directions. Great spirits. There's small spirits of elemental spirits, but then the largest spirits are the ones that are associated with the elemental directions of east, south, west, and north, which are at the same time the fundamental forces of air, fire, water, and earth. And you can commune with fire by standing out in the sunlight. You can commune with water by, putting your feet in the river and just open yourself up. It's accessible. The real problem is that people's brains are too freaking busy and they can't slow down to notice what's going on around them, what's much less in their own minds. The stuff is happening all around. The native traditions are about, they don't teach meditation because if you're really in touch with your environment, you're kind of meditated automatically. You're synced. You're synced and you're in the zone. And things come up and they arise and they go down. And you realize that life is a constant succession of inexplicable miracles. I like the small ones. The big ones are tricky. It comes with catches and fine print. The little ones, I'm good with those.
Really
And they
great,
happen
great.
all the time around Native people. And if you want to check it out, just go to your local Native American people somewhere. They're probably listening to a phone book. The reservations have websites and whatever. Say you want to go to an Inipi, you want to experience an Inipi, a sweat lodge. You go to one of those run by a native of any sort, and that'll be an initiation. I guarantee you that.
So that's not Matthew Milliner. Remember, Michael? He was kind of saying the same thing. Don't presume you know too much. The basic hospitality in a humble way, but there is a welcoming. You're saying it's not an imposition.
They love to teach. They have the wisdom. They know that needs to be shared.
Yeah.
And the most terrible thing for one of those people is that no one asks them to share what they know.
Wow, that's really good to hear.
Yeah, and then it gets lost. And then
Yeah.
people have to start, recreating it from the wheel again. And that's what a lot of this New Age spirituality is. You got people with, profound impulses, but no guidance. There's no one that really represents it. There's people that go out, teach theories and have these grand, ideas about stuff, but to really start living with your feet on the ground here in this continent, you need good examples of how it's done. And once you get it, it's real simple.
Really neat. Stephen, like if you took
it's open source is what it is.
Open source.
Everyone
Open source.
contributes.
Yeah.
No one's in charge because the spirits are there and they will give agreement or not, when people put themselves up. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it would just be not all, and I don't know the percentages, but a certain number of our listeners would be from the Roman Catholic tradition, and your work, especially on the American continent, has a huge role for Our Lady of Guadalupe. Is there specifically, if you would kind of wax on that a little bit in your thinking, but also, is there another access point? Let's say somebody is heard what you just said, I don't know, I'm not going to be able to find these people. Within kind of somewhat more traditional Catholic piety, do you see an access point through a certain type of devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe? Let's say something about the role of her in your thinking and the future of spirituality on this landmass.
Right. Well, the Lady of Guadalupe phenomenon came about soon after the 1492 events. I think it wasn't until 1521 that she made her apparition, and she's called the Lady of Guadalupe because the Spanish that were involved in that area where she appeared were from Guadalupe, Spain, so they brought the Madonna over with her, and regardless if it was a miracle imprint from the spiritual world on the tilma of the young lady, or whether it was a talented native artist who did it, is pretty much a moot point as far as I'm concerned. It's got a power to it that people are attracted to, because all over the world, people respond to the idea of the goddess, and it's an authentic, primal impulse that unfortunately has to exist on the fringes. Well, in the Roman Catholic Church, it's not. It's a major part. And a lot of people, the real connection to the Catholic Church is only through the Madonna, and that's fine, I guess. But the Protestants, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The evangelical churches, they aren't going there. But there's a numinous quality to it, because the goddess was always at the forefront of the devotions of the native people here. And there's a tremendous momentum in karmic and cultural history, thousands of years that come through that people resonate with, I believe. But it's just an image. There are other images. There are other more local images. You could get the Virgin on a tortilla, and it could open your heart, and hey, whatever works. So,
Michael, what are you thinking here?
Well, I'm thinking about a million things.
Yeah.
But I think Stephen's pointing out to something that I've been trying to get people to pay attention to for a long time, is, how to, as I've said before, right? The idea in my interpretation of Sophiology is that it simultaneously connects us to the cosmos in the creation, in the earth itself, right?
Yeah.
And because without that, without both of those, you get no place. I mean, the only place to go is to kind of a mental illness. Really. And Stephen's kind of reinforcing that idea for me. And I like, I like this in the readings you sent to us. I like this idea that where you use the tree of life and you flip it over and show the overworld on the underworld. Is that how you put it? The overworld? Yes. Yeah. And I like that, and I think that resonates with, and I think a lot of people listening, because I hear from people all the time, that will resonate, because this is the thing that has been missing. This is Carl Jung talked about this how long ago, right? This is the thing that was, and his wife did too in her book on the Grail, right? Mm-hmm. So how, it's a retrieval, and I think this is where kind of connects to the Gnostic myth of Sophia in exile, right? Because it's not that Sophia was in exile, it's that humanity, for the most part, especially Western humanity, exiled her, right? So, and this retrieval, I think, is an important, I can't even emphasize how important this is for the future. Because without it, I mean, I think what we look at right now, I mean, you look at the trans thing that's going on right now. That is, to me, in thinking in these kind of spiritual terms, it's a repercussion of a kind of nominalism for one thing, but the other part, the part that's missing is the integration, right? There's not there's not an integration of the spiritual and the earthly and the telluric, right?
Mm.
And some people that makes people disconnected, not only disconnected from the world and from creation, but indeed from their own bodies. So how do we, so I think the path that Stephen lays out here is the path forward.
I think it's going to be the next half of earthly evolution.
Next half, that's my thought.
Is the reemergence of the goddess into general consciousness, and the transformations that are going to have to take place to fix what's gone wrong in this world. And now earlier, Michael, before we started, you mentioned you might want a little bit of a biography here.
Yeah.
Got started and all this, and I'll tell you this now because I think it's relevant at this point. I remember when I dropped into my body when I was 3 years old. I walked out of the back door of the house through the kitchen and the porch and outside, and I was standing there. All of a sudden, bam! I felt I was in my body for the first time. And
I think I remember when it happened to me. Yeah.
I think everybody had that experience, and many people forget it, but if it's strong enough, it really makes an imprint. And I've remembered it ever since. And I realized that I was surrounded by, not surrounded by, but I was infused by, along with everything else, the light of Christ was like imminent, and ominous, it was just everything. But it was beautiful. But at the same time, I had this horrible creeping feeling that something had gone terribly wrong, and I said, wait a minute, things might not have been great the last time I was here, but it wasn't like this. Something really, really weird has gone on since last time I was here. Now, I have peculiar ideas about reincarnation, but we won't go there. But memories that I don't know are mine, I have, about living in a better world. And I was driven to explore, what is it that's going on? So I got involved in science and everything like that. And I realized it was the atomic bombs. I was born in 1948.
Yeah, your work is so powerful on that. Yeah.
I was born in 1948, 3 years after they started popping off atom bombs, all over the place. I mean, thousands of, I think 3,000 nuclear tests around the world, each one of which has torn a rent in the fabric, the membrane of this world.
Yeah.
Cells have membranes, we have skin on the outside of our bodies. That's our systemic integrity. Well, the systemic integrity of this world has been seriously damaged by those atomic blasts. And atomic reactors are not a whole lot better. They're working with energies that are necessary for things to exist in the physical. We've got to have electrons and neutrons and protons and quarks and all these things. That's the substratum of physical reality. We wouldn't have physical incarnation if we didn't have all that stuff. But it's got to be in its right place, and it's not. And so there's a big, big problem with that. Now, the thing is, according to my research, the atomic bomb could only have been developed in this part of the world because it had the ancestral heritage of all the bad shamanic magic that had gone on here for so long, like it has everywhere. I don't know if it was better or worse than any other part in the world, But the shamanic energy in this part of the world was always concerned with how to deal with those really strong, call them harmonic internal forces of the earth. And they had ways for dealing with them. Successive civilizations, of which the one in Teotihuacan was one, developed strategies for neutralizing those toxic energies. But human nature being what it is, there was a big struggle at the time of 2,000 years ago, where there was a big struggle over, the dark side against the light side. And you had the light side in the underworld too. It's mostly light. These evil apparitions we see, they're aberrations. As Steiner said, evil is only something that's out of time or out of place that's otherwise good. And these subnatural forces are exactly that. But they're dangerous, like I said before, and you have people that were messing with them and working against the mission of Christ there. But the predominant powers were the successful ones, the ones that defeated the dark forces, right, as it had done successively before and afterwards. And when the Spaniards came in and upset the ancestral traditions and knowledge of this stuff, they also destroyed the fail-safe spiritualities that the native people had in place. And then you have the onrush of technology, the national security state, the industrial military complex.
Isn't that kind of the legend of the ring, right? You know, just that, this thing is out there, it gets rediscovered and it's used for bad purposes. Like you said, they lost the fail safe for this thing.
Oh, I think Stephen froze up a second.
Oh, okay. Huh. He speaks with a lot of authority on this stuff, doesn't he, Michael?
Not only that, but I think the bad guys just froze his screen.
We'll
So
see. He has my
here.
text number. And I can also tell him, friends, if he can't join us again, we'll have him on again sometime.
And I'm not
soon.
kidding that they froze his screen. Like I said earlier about the fairies with James Tunney, right?
Yeah, he starts talking about Los Alamos and what's going on here. And I really encourage people. He's probably trying to sign on one more time so we can chat for a little bit.
Okay.
But what were some of your other takeaways from his work, Michael?
Well, what I think, what I've been thinking about the whole time he's been talking is my wife Bonnie has been reading this book by a Native American medicine man who is a Christian and who is connecting, kind of like what Matthew Milliner does in his work, where he's connecting the native spirituality with Christianity. And one of the, and he talks about the 7 generations, right? Where what we're doing now is the fruit of 7 generations before, and what we do today has to have fruit 7 generations.
Okay, yeah.
So whatever we do, it's going to come out that way.
It's not very American, Mike.
Well, it's Native American, right?
I know, but it's not very American, like the instant gratification thing. But
no.
Right. Yeah.
And she actually, because Bonnie is part Native American.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
And she realized that her ancestor, her great grandmother, where she is, was actually 7 generations before her.
Wow. So
we're now at the 7th generation.
Yeah.
And she feels a real strong affinity for that. And it was interesting. One of the things this medicine man, I don't know the name of the book. I was going to go get it. He talks about the 7 fires. I think the 7.
You talked for a little bit. I'm gonna.
The 7 flames of the 7 fires, and he had, there's like a carving in some stones, about these 7 flames, and it looks like a menorah. So it's kind of a fascinating connection there. And actually another friend of ours, Sarah Height, who we talked to, her husband Todd, he spent a lot of time out west in the Southwest looking at petroglyphs, which are in Paleo Hebrew. So he's really learned in that stuff, and he's been traveling, in fact, all over the world, investigating these inscriptions of Paleo Hebrew that are found in Native American rock carvings, and he finds similar ones, right? I think, well, as Sarah was telling us, when they lived near Petra, which those of you watching right now will remember Petra is the place where in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where they find the Holy Grail, right? But Sarah lived near Petra, and they were investigating the petroglyphs there, which also in Paleo Hebrew. So there are all these connections, and as Matthew Milliner, you can find this on our on our backlog, as Matthew Milliner was saying, what happened with a lot of Native Americans when the Western settlers came here and started talking about Jesus. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we know that guy. He was here before. Yeah, we know all about him."
Stephen just called, he said, I think, since we started talking about Los Alamos.
You said the same thing too, huh?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
he's trying. And so Michael, we can talk for a few more minutes. And then what I told him, like
Awesome.
maybe within the next month, we could have him on for part 2.
Yeah,
There's this
but I wasn't
whole-
kidding.
this whole-
I
Yeah.
was not kidding when I said that.
No, one of the things that interested me in his essays, and again, people, if you just Google Stephen Clarke and Ian Clarke and the Mexican mysteries, make sure you read the footnotes because I'll put you onto the work of this R.J. Stewart. But he's talking about, again, the courts of the mother. And, and some people take umbrage at maybe the word feminism, but he's saying like this thing that we're moving toward, he finds it kind of there in jazz, abstract art. Think of like Kandinsky and so forth. 12-step programs, self-help, co-counseling, feminism. So feminism, we could say, like, again, embracing the feminine, consensus decision-making, grassroots psychology, fringe spirituality, environmental activism, anti-war movements, and things like that. And so these things that come from the bottom, some of us might kind of bristle that some list would turn some people off. There's a great book called The Forbidden Image written by a French scholar. It's a whole history of icons. And he found the most spiritual work in the last 200 years. Alain Besson was his name. Just a traditional French Catholic, but it was Kandinsky's abstract work. And, this gives us a sense of what we're talking about from the underworld. Now, again, you've been on committee meetings, Michael, where you have to do consensus decision-making. And we want to shoot ourselves, right? Who wouldn't want some like tyrant clerical priest to come in and make the decision?
Well,
that takes so long. Yeah, go ahead.
As you were ticking off that list there, I was
Yeah.
thinking, oh yeah, those things all sound good in theory, but
Yeah, me too. I
but that's what happens. But that's what happens, in every one of those instances. It's and this is a problem, right? This is a serious problem that people don't pay attention to. This is when the egregore moves in, right? The egregore moves in and kind of spoils it.
So tell one story kind of from beginning to end. Like you were on a good committee. You were
well,
involved,
no, well, the thing is, you start, whether it's a committee, I mean, and it starts off, but what happens, it gets bogged down every single one of if you're doing consensus.
Yeah.
And I used to say we shouldn't call it consensus. We should just call it wearing down the people who want to get something done.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Because it becomes inefficient. That not just inefficient, it becomes counterproductive, and nothing ever gets done.
Yeah.
Whereas, and this is what I think with the problem with.
But what's your solution? How do you spot the egregore? Or like what point?
Well, I think I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think it's also you see it. I've been thinking a lot about, and I plan on writing about it maybe this week, about deinstitutionalization of structure, of whether it's the academy or the church or whatever it happens to be, because those things, what happens, and I was thinking of the Celtic Church as a model, and I bet Stephen would have examples from Native American spirituality and governance, where the Celtic Church was far enough away from Rome to kind of do their own thing and be organic. But then eventually Rome comes in and says, well, we're going to make you part of the fold now. We're going to send a guy over here, right? And kind of kills the livingness. So it doesn't entirely kill it, but it kills some of the livingness of it. And I think that's what you have, and that's why, you know, is that when I was talking with who was I talking to? I can't remember. I was talking to somebody. Well, last week when I was talking about DMT and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right? The problem with is we heard is that, you know, with whatever psychedelic people are going to start to make legal, then what happens is, you know, the suits get involved, just like with cannabis, right? The suits get involved, and all of a sudden it becomes corporatized. And we know how and so how can you avoid going there? And how can you keep it alive, right? How can you keep it small and beautiful?
Keep it small. Again,
Right.
the obsession at growth at all points, you know, growth. That's where, again, perishable currency comes in. But like, we do these bottom up things like consensus decision making, and then people they map it onto false paradigms like growth or scarcity and so forth, and then they turn against themselves. But it does look like we probably won't have Stephen back this hour. There was something else about what he said. Oh, you know, we're going to keep on exploring this underworld. I learned a lot today, you know.
Yeah.
But he again seemed like, to me, a pretty authentic initiate. So we'll do this again in a couple of weeks. I think next week, Michael. You know, I want to have our friend Therese Schroeder because I told you why. And then I can do a shout out. I had two fans of the podcast, husband and wife, Wilhelm Hoyer and his wife Sally they were in the area at a Catholic worker farm. They've traveled the world, but they came to visit this Saturday. We had a great talk, but they were so fascinating on family and like the image of birthing, to understand so much about our culture, that I said one of our upcoming podcasts, we would have them both on, whether they had two separate computers. And I know I can name a couple subjects. So
Right.
We invite people to keep on listening. Thank you for listening to the Regeneration Podcast. Mike, any announcements about
I have an
Substack?
announcement.
Yeah,
So
please.
next weekend, or actually, the weekend after this goes, I will be in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's a big event. Tell
And
people
it's a
about
big
it.
event. And I will be there with Paul Vanderklay, if anybody knows who he is.
That's a
And
new name to me, but it's now very familiar.
no, he's
Newish.
he's a Calvinist or pastor, but also, so Paul will be there, and Spencer Clavin, who has a new book out, How to Save the West, and
The Irish guy.
the Irish guy, Mark Connolly,
Yeah.
who and another guy named Joe. What's Joe's last name? Joe,
I don't know that one.
what's Joe's last
I thought
name?
I just saw there was four of you. But so people
Well,
can.
it's 3 of us, but the guys putting it out are Mark and
Okay.
Joe, and we'll be in Washington, D.C. And
People
that's
can buy
actually,
tickets. Do you have the? Can you? Oh, how about this? Send me the link. And we'll
I'll
put it
send
on.
you the link, and you can
Yeah.
throw it up on the thing. But it's next Saturday and Sunday, the 29th and 30th of
Okay.
July,
Yeah, sounds
in
good.
Washington, D.C.
And what's the title again? I should be able to.
Title is, just make sure I got it right.
I think it's something like, decline.
No.
No.
It's I always forget. It's a complicated title. Let me check in the title here.
Sure.
The title is Christ, Community, and Renewing
That's
Culture.
right. So that should be big. That should
Yeah.
be big. So we
And we
encourage
had a
everybody.
nice conversation the other day. It was actually a lot of fun talking to these guys. Yeah, so I like these guys, and
We'll have to break it down after you do it too.
okay,
We can have a Regeneration Podcast exclusive.
there we go.
All right. Well, it's hot as Hades here. I'm going to go actually take a quick swim in the pool and then do a few things in the garden. And we've got a daughter getting married, I think, in 2 weekends from this weekend.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, super exciting. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, fans, for listening to the Regeneration Podcast. Again, Stephen, we lost you, and we hope to have you back real soon. I found that super fascinating.
Now we're
Thanks,
talking about the bad guys.
I don't know. It's so crazy, isn't it?